small presentation with regard. I did it basically with some journalists that I spoke to in Balochistan. So it starts with.
Light off करो ना उधर से. मैं आता हूँ.
I think you can see.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's fine.
Oh, sorry. So there's like basically terrorism charges to silence journalists. Some of them who told me since the launch of CPEC, several have been assaulted and even detained. They're being placed in fourth schedule, which is an anti-terrorism law. And then even on reporting on sectarian violence can land one's name on the list, as happened with the journalist from Dalbadin. And they're all being putting after he reported on Gwadar about the water issues. He was put on the anti-terror watch list. So this is an interesting also a case study in which 5 journalists from Balochistan were asked to come and explain their work at Frontier Corps district headquarters, and they were grilled for 3 hours. This is also a body of a journalist was dumped. Razak Gul, he was a local journalist who was found dumped in a deserted area near Turbat in 2012. He was investigating the nexus between the military and the drug trade in the region, which is also something which is a taboo topic. Then reporting on land grabbing in the area is also a big issue. And since the government has announced plans for Chinese investment, this is going a little fast than I would have expected. Then there's a financial blackmailing of news organizations, because primarily most of the news organizations have ad revenue from the government, so they cannot report on a lot of issues which basically the government sort of financially blackmails them and says that we will not give you ads if you do not work within the framework that they give. Okay, we can just stop this. So basically, one thing that I just wanted to mention about was about how when in Balochistan, I've been to Balochistan to report there, and there were the biggest issue is of access, and we do not really get any access to go to areas other than through this sort of. So you do read sometimes international reports, but most of the time those reports are coming through embedded reporting, whereby you have to be embedded by the military, which and the ISPR, and they take you to these trips. For example, very recently what the ISPR started doing is that they take you to trips to Turbat, they take you to trips to Gwadar, and these are very organized, controlled trips where you do not have any independence to go anywhere you want to go, and you have a controlled sort of environment where you meet people in the field are also controlled. The areas you go are also pre-decided, and you cannot independently move around. So I tried to go around and sort of independently go around in Balochistan, but none of the local journalists wanted to work with me. None of the local stringers wanted to work with me. They said that you have to come through the military. So it's one of the biggest issues of reporting from Balochistan is the issue of access that you do not have. The other thing that basically, I was recently talking to a friend of he's a Baloch journalist. He's living in exile in Europe right now, and he basically in 2-3 years ago he covered the story in Gwadar, which we've been talking about, and the story he covered was about the water crisis there, and the locals have been sort of protesting because there's not fresh water for the locals, and they were protesting, and some of the protests that were covered by local journalists, those local journalists were rounded up, including this person that I know, and they were taken to the military sort of cantonment area, where the local military commander asked them that why did you cover this protest. So even when it comes down to socio-economic issues of local people, that those issues are not allowed to be discussed or to be covered, and people get threats because of that. Very recently, what I found out, which is very alarming, is also another trend that we're seeing. Is we were talking about the Chinese consulate and how people are being implicated in that. Recently, the media was there was this information that was leaked to the media in which a person that was missing already was implicated in a case of a terrorist case, and to be said that he was a 13-14-year-old kid, and they said that he is basically involved, and then Fortunately, BBC had done a story about him going missing a few weeks before. So then the police had to pull back that notification that it had issued, in which they had named him as one of the prime suspects that was caught from Karachi, whereas he was kidnapped from Balochistan along with his family members. Similarly, we're also getting reports. I was talking to some friends of mine in Balochistan who were telling me that now what China started doing is that they've started taking journalists to Beijing, which is a new thing that they're doing, to do an orientation sort of a session where they basically approach these journalists from Balochistan, from Pakistan mainstream areas, and they take them to Beijing, and then they over there they give them this orientation and sort of tell them what the Chinese sort of idea of reporting should be, and at times some of the journalists who have gone there have said that it's probably also to develop an alternative Chinese intelligence network within the Pakistani journalists, because the Chinese also at times do not believe the Pakistanis, whether or not the Pakistanis are telling the truth with regards to a lot of because and they have to save their investment. So in that sense, we have that, and one last thing was, yes. Okay. And just one last thing, another alarming thing that I saw that I would like to mention to you people, and something that we should talk about is that recently I spoke to some people in Pakistan who were from Balochistan, who were activists, and they were basically, when they were abducted or they were picked up, they were brought to Karachi, where they were interrogated by the Chinese. So now Pakistan is giving access to activists that it abducts to the Chinese, and we've seen that happening before with America, with the United States, with the war on terror sort of suspects that were given access, and there were these rendition sites or secret internment centers. Similarly, now we're seeing that China is being given the same kind of access to Pakistani and activists from Balochistan, and they're being tortured, and they're being sort of questioned about their agendas in these secret prisons by the Chinese. So this is also an alarming trend that perhaps one needs to talk about in the coming days. Thank you.
Also that now what the process is going about these disappeared persons, that they are being held incommunicado for 2 years.